Maybe you could just give an overview generally of where does the work you do sit between, how do we differentiate AI, machine learning, natural language processing, and all of these types of terms?
Yeah, so I always kind of have this description of artificial intelligence as a colloquial term, and I always draw an analogy to it with the definition of the word planet. So it used to be, planet is kind of a technical term, but actually it's not anymore. Most people, if you ask them what planet means, they say it means those 9 things that orbit the sun, right?
Yeah.
And Pluto's on it. And then we took Pluto off the list of planets, and then everyone got angry, right? And we all remember.
Everyone's favorite planet.
Right. It's like this little tiny guy, you're beating up on him. He's just, he's not out there hurting anybody. Why we, even though he's named after, the god of the underworld.
No, he's named after that big Disney dog.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Incidentally, a total aside is why did Disney name that dog Pluto?
It always felt like there was some dark underside to him.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. But anyhow, so and so now there's 8 planets, and everyone's like, no, that's not what planet means. And scientists are like, well, but astronomers are saying, well, we need this specific scientific definition, a technical definition. And the technical definition ran away with the colloquial one. It just, no one cared. Yeah. And artificial intelligence is kind of like that as a word. If you ask anyone on the street, what does artificial intelligence mean? They might say, computers that think, or they might say scary cyborgs from Austria. It's sort of just mixed in with science fiction and everything. And so it's not a super precise term. I mean, it's being used as a general term for computers that mimic human-like behaviors, the sort of cognitive things we do, but it's not super precise. And so that's kind of the broad definition in my mind of what of artificial intelligence is it's just sort of this it's self-driving cars, and it's those algorithms that predict what things we should see on Facebook and what things we shouldn't, or it's the text to speech sort of things, or it's it's that when you call into you call into one of those automated voice response systems, and you say the number or say the thing you want, it tries to figure it out. Yeah, those all fall under artificial intelligence, but it's broader than that. But machine learning itself is a little more narrowly defined, which is sort of I always describe it as math at scale. Machine learning is taking a lot of math that we've known how to do for a long time and scaling it up to create things that mimic human cognitive things. Some of this is just statistical analysis that we've known how to do for a long time. I had someone comment to me in Quora one time that, impact analysis and forecasting isn't machine learning. It's just statistics. And another person responded to him and said that, computer scientists discovered math and called it machine learning. Yeah. And that's kind of what it is. It's just the big difference is that we have enough transistors as a species that we can do this at a scale that we've never been able to do it at before, and so we can do math problems that we couldn't do before. And so, I mean, some of that's just basic algorithms, decision trees, but it's like, hey, it's a decision tree, but we've got 1,000 decision trees, and then we can ensemble their results and do this at a scale that's never been possible. And so that's kind of where machine learning falls. It's sort of creating, it's just math, but at a really high level, or a really scaled up level. Neural networks are a type of machine learning, a way of an algorithm. And I feel like saying algorithm is a little disingenuous, but we'll call it an algorithm. It's a way of doing machine learning that creates structures that it's kind of got a marketing. It's got good marketing because everyone says neural network, like a brain, right? It's like, well, that's not really accurate. But it is loosely inspired by that idea of, you've got neurons and connections and stuff like that. But really the connections are the important part, not the neurons. And And neural networks can solve any kind of machine learning problem. It's just not always the most efficient way to do it. Some of the algorithms are more efficient. Just like legs in a human being can navigate pretty much any terrain, but if you're walking down the road, wheels are actually way more efficient.
Yeah.
But it's more general purposed, and it does certain things that straight up algorithms don't do well. And when you start making the neural networks big and giving them lots of layers, it starts getting into this area that they call deep learning, because they're neural networks that have lots and lots of layers and in depth, right? Just like, hey, we got 7 layers here, and so that's deep as opposed to shallow, where we only have like 1 or 2 layers. And that's the kind of stuff that's being used by companies like Google, where they're doing a lot of image processing. They're doing a lot of sentiment analysis. They're doing like recurrent neural networks to generate text based off of other text. I saw a talk the other day where someone took all the Game of Thrones scripts and fed them into a recurrent neural network to generate new lines for Game of Thrones. Right? And so neural networks are doing those sorts of things, and the deep learning is sort of the really advanced neural networks doing the really kind of cutting edge stuff.
Yeah,
it feels like a rather long-winded description of the field, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we started. It's funny when you get into it. I started to build just something that I wouldn't even call it. If we get back to the sort of the opaqueness of machine learning, the first version of Yene was just a communication tool. The second version was really an aggregator. So an aggregator and a scorer. And what we did was pulled in a bunch of feedback data from 20, 30 different sources and weighted them based on looking at the text and taking a guess at the relevancy and creating a weight and then generating a single sort of trackable score that could come out of that for customers. Is that machine learning or is that just math basically at the end of the day? And the machine learning bit is maybe trying to generate some type of a relevancy weight, but the rest of it's just basic addition and division. So
yeah.
And what we've gotten into now, where we're actually hitting multiple sources, and we're working with municipalities, police departments, and city arts, and there's a couple law firms thrown in there, but you just get these completely disparate types of data and these different types of input. And where I think the neural network could come in, could be powerful and beneficial, and we're not there yet, but you can take all of these different inputs, put them in different nodes, handling different pieces and being able to push them down a line and find the similarities or the differences and then make decisions on what the next steps are based on that. That's really powerful. But I've also found that it's not quite user friendly at this point.
Yeah.
There's still quite a lot of work to go on that. The way that I describe artificial intelligence to people now, it's a new definition. I tell them it's basically a term for Elon Musk to use to scare the general public so that he gets people don't. So,
well, he's not the only one doing that. Personally, I'm not worried about it at all. I get that question occasionally. Are you worried about Skynet? And I'm like, I for one welcome our new robot overlords. Yeah. But no, everyone thinks it's going to be Skynet or it's going to be HAL 9000, and the thing I'm worried about isn't smart machines. I'm worried about really dumb machines.
Yeah.
You've probably seen the movie RoboCop, right?
Yep.
That scene with Ed 209, and it doesn't realize the guy's put the gun down and shoots him anyhow.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that scares me. I'm not worried about really good artificial intelligence. I'm worried about bad artificial intelligence.
I've been telling people, it's I don't want to get into a sort of dark place, but I sort of feel like the next war is going to be fought with robots, and whoever is in that zone where they let these things out, I feel bad for them,
Yeah.
Because these things are going to malfunction, and they're going to get into situations they don't understand, and they're going to try and input the data and then make a decision. And I think that's really what separates us from quote unquote machines, although people would make the argument human beings are machines. But I think it's the ability to make no decision or to take no action that really separates us. The machine is always going to decide something based on what it's been programmed to do, and that's not always going to be a good decision.
Yeah, although it really shouldn't be. In some ways, it might just be our limitation of us and how we're programming it, how we're training it, and saying, "Well, is it this or this?"
Yeah.
And we never give it an option for "I don't know."
Yeah.
Right. When you're building a classification model, you're like, is it a hot dog or a wiener dog? And then it's got to be one or the other, because it's like, you've created a binary universe where that's not really true.
It's an odd thing to think, there's people out there who actually believe I'm going to build something smarter than me. I'm impressed and shocked at the power that is out there right now for everyday users to go find really powerful libraries and platforms and piece things together and put things out into the world that some are really cool and some are really scary. But we do live in a world where you can piece together something really powerful really quickly. So
yeah, I've been writing software for a very, very long time myself, and I remember getting my first domain name back in like 1995.
Yeah.
And I had to learn HTML to put anything on it.
Yeah.
And of course, it had images of rotating skulls and blinking text and the marquee tag, but because that was everything looked like MySpace back then.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, talking about so what is this is kind of how an interview with me goes, as I ramble and then we just ramble off. And is there something that really attracted you to make this jump over into this type of work, and where do you kind of see it going as far as your focus and the industry as a whole over the next few 5 years?
So I came to technology because it's just sort of, I always say it was a calling, because it's something that just always drew me as a child. And so, when I was in elementary school back in the 80s, I was like 10 years old, and I read a book I was always interested in science and technology and stuff. Then I read a book on programming, and I'm like, I'm going to do that when I grow up. And then I just pursued it, which I realize makes me extraordinarily fortunate as a human being, because most people have no idea what they want to do their life, even when they're in their 30s. Yeah. And I had this clear vision as a child that I was going to, go out and write software. And so I pursued that, and I've been incrementally, adjusting my skills my whole career as technologies change. I started my first paid gig was actually writing COBOL code. It was in the early 90s. So, I was on the tail end of a thing, right? And I just went from that doing C++ and have just sort of incrementally moved with tech as tech has moved. And then I've gotten into the machine learning space here recently, and I'm far from an expert on machine learning. I'm not a data scientist. I don't have a heavy math background. I've got a strong developer background. And so my role here at Nexosis is developer evangelist, because I'm kind of, I guess, I hope this doesn't sound weird, but I'm a charismatic coder. And so I could, I got a foot in people skills and I got a foot in technology. And so that makes me good as a developer evangelist, but it's a new role to me. And so, a year ago, I was hearing everyone talk about machine learning. I'm saying I should probably look into that, because that's going to be the next thing. Everyone's talking about it, but it's really been kind of it's challenging. And if any developers out there are listening, and I certainly hope they are, you probably are where I was at, which was, this looks kind of scary, and it's different from all the other things I've learned across my career. As developers, I've gone through, you have to constantly, be learning new technology and stuff. And you're learning the how of it. You're learning how does, hey, I need to learn Python. Well, how does Python work? I already know what it's for. Python's for writing applications. But how does it work? How's it different from, say, JavaScript or C++ or Ruby or whatever language you were coming to Python from? Or if you're looking at a new framework and you're like, well, I've done Rails, and so now I'm going to the Python. So I'm going to look at Django, and I know what it's for already, and so I just need to know how it works. But going into machine learning, that how approach didn't work.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what it was for or why. And I think a lot of developers are kind of looking at it and they're a little afraid and they're trying to not to think about it. And so I got a job and I was kind of doing the same thing. Like, well, there's all these mobile apps to write, and I'm getting paid and stuff's good. Um, and machine learning, it's on my radar. I need to look at it someday, but I haven't really looked closely at it yet. And I got this job as a developer evangelist, and I had to start going deeper into it.
Yeah.
And I think from a developer perspective, particularly, the next several years are just going to be developers figuring out what it's for and how to incorporate it into their applications. How does this solve problems for me as a developer? A lot of people are like, well, we're going to have AI and then we won't need to write software anymore. I don't think that's true at all.
Yeah.
I've run into a lot of people that are like, how do I get this decision into my model? It's like, well, you could just write an if statement in your code. A lot of people are trying to swap out the middle tier. So if I get too software focused, stop me. But in software, you've got sort of your screen stuff, you got your presentation stuff, and then you've got your middle tier business logic, and then you've got your back end data access stuff. So that middle piece, the business logic, everyone's trying to just replace the whole thing with a big pile of machine learning.
Yeah.
And I think the next trend over the next several years in development is going to be to try to do that and realize that that's not always the right solution. Because that's always the pattern. There's this pattern of fancy new technology, apply it to everything. It's my new golden hammer.
Sure.
And then, oh, it was only actually good for these things. And so from a developer point of view, I think that's what we're going to see. I think the deep learning stuff for the next 5 years is going to be really interesting. And I don't know that anyone has a really solid idea of what to expect. I know that like the self-driving car problem is getting pretty solved.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be a bad time to say, get your CDL to be a trucker. If you're starting that as a career choice, you're 20 and you want to be a trucker, that might not be a good investment.
It's like being a film stripper in the late 90s.
Right. It's just, and I've got a cousin whose son is pursuing that, and I'm just like, I'm like, dude, don't do this. He's like, that's what I want to do. It's like, okay, yeah. I tried to tell you. But so there's certainly going to be a lot of disruption in that kind of stuff. I don't know that I think a lot of the things that I think we're using this a lot more than we realize we are now. I mean, we're just starting to realize. I mentioned Facebook earlier, and obviously they're in the news right now. And they've been using machine learning for a long time to try and predict what sorts of articles you'll click on to help drive ad revenue. And no one realized it.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the machine learning impact on society is going to be things that people just say, well, that got easier. And they're not going to think twice about it. And then until they realize, oh, what I lose, I missed something in there in doing that. It's going to be, because that's kind of what's happening with Facebook now. I'll be on Facebook and I'll say, well, I haven't seen a post from this person in a long time. I wonder why. Did they stop using Facebook? And I'll go look, and they haven't. It just I wasn't interacting with them enough, and so it stopped showing me their feed.
Yeah. That's actually been. I would say for me, there's been a lot of really cool stuff I've seen, and the amount of change and progress in technology in my lifetime has been amazing. I feel like what we've created over the last 10 to 15 years is sales and marketing on steroids.
Yeah,
that's really what we've got with Facebook right now. And me as someone who, ever since the 90s, I mean, we would talk about when we were setting up CMSs and having people register for accounts, and we would have daily or weekly discussions on protecting people's data and how do we make sure they're private, and how do we make sure that we're not collecting information of children, under 16 or 13 once that law passed.
Yeah.
So, when you see these companies come out and they say, well, we didn't foresee this, or we didn't know. I tend to be, and I could just be that I'm jaded, I kind of call BS on that,
Yeah.
because those people are smarter than I am. I don't have a problem admitting that. And this is stuff that would have come up, but the imperative to actually produce revenue will override some of those better sides of human being at times. And that for me has been, if there's been a downside, it's seeing that.
Regarding privacy and just the data that's gathered, um, I think there's this pattern where you get these grooves, right? That naturally lead you to extremes. And we've seen this on Facebook, right? So if you click on like a slightly conservative article or a slightly liberal article, it says, "Oh, slightly liberal." And then you get sent down a even more liberal or even more conservative path until you're like on the extremes. Um, and then once you're there, then that's all you see, and it influences you. There's like a feedback cycle
Yeah.
that creates this artificial bubble. So the machine learning models are constantly learning from that data, right?
Yeah.
And they're actually kind of coming. I think the interaction of the human with the algorithm and all the other humans sort of creates this feedback loop that drives you down this weird path of extremes, which is why a lot of online communities feel so I don't know, hostile maybe, or divisive or divided, is that it's sort of like sorting us out in ways that aren't supposed to be sorted. It's kind of like I always get asked this question: can I use machine learning to predict the stock market? And the first answer I always give is, well, if we figured out how to do that, then we wouldn't be trying to sell you this product. We just go make a bunch of money in the stock market and retire,
Yeah.
right? But there's a feedback cycle that happens there, that the information I get by predicting the stock market then has me do something that affects the stock market and then invalidates that prediction.
Yeah.
And I think that when humans interact with machine learning models, there's a similar sort of phenomena happening, a big chaos versus a small chaos, where you start getting down this path of, because I'm responding to the results of the prediction, that then influences the next prediction and sort of creates that cycle. And then this creates skewed models that we can use for all kinds of dysfunctional things. So you've probably heard charges about, machine learning is racist, right? Well, no, the data is, right. It's not necessarily the machine learning. It's that garbage in, garbage out thing.
Yep.
If the data has bias, then the model's going to have bias. And I think we sort of create this bias feedback loop that runs us down these paths with machine learning sometimes. Long term, that's probably going to bite us, but I'm not sure what that's going to look like
it's
yet.
already started to a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's profit motives that you talked about, that whether you want to call it a bubble echo chamber. But what people found was, oh, if somebody likes this, they'll really like this, and then they'll really like this, and we continue to kind of ding them every time and pitch to them, and they buy more if they get this, when that might be the best way to sell the most product. But the alternative view of looking at that is, hey, if you seem to be really into whether it's liberal or conservative media, we could also make decisions to say, let's try and push them a little bit another way, or let's try and educate them in some specific way. That creates a little bit of tension, or a little discomfort maybe. But that was kind of, I guess, when I was working in the 90s, when the internet was really breaking, that was kind of the holy grail. That was what I thought. I thought we're going to go down this path, and everyone's going to be more educated and have more knowledge, and kind of the better side of humanity could really come out. And it doesn't. I don't want to say that hasn't happened. I'm sure that has happened to some extent. It doesn't feel like that's happened as a whole, though.
Yeah, I think it's happened for some people. I mean, I feel like that's happened for me personally.
Yeah.
That I've got greater access to knowledge. I mean, I've been able to use all this free information on the internet to broaden my view of the world, to meet people from all over the globe without having to leave Ohio.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even used it to learn how to read Spanish, uh, just because it was all there, and so I think it has had that effect for people. I kind of wonder if it's back to that joke where I was joking earlier about how is it a hot dog or a wiener dog, but there's no context to say I don't know.
Yeah.
If our classifiers are just saying it's either this or that, and so it's like they're creating false dichotomies,
Sure.
and they have to drive you down one path or another, and those are the two choices. Because as soon as you say it's either this or that, then that sort of pushes out a plurality of views, and everyone likes to say it's either X or it's Y, but there's lots of times things in life are just big gray smears. That's not either this or that. It's am I a foolish man or a wise man? Well, it depends. I'm both, right?
we all like to think we're a Rembrandt painting, but we're much closer to a Jackson Pollock, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So to that end, I mean, are you spending your downtime and your quote unquote spare cycles really focusing on technology, or do you have some other things that you do to kind of wind down and chill out?
So I would say the older I get, the less I spend my downtime doing technical things.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing that most of my life. The way I keep my skills sharp has generally been I'll come up with some pet project idea that I never finish, but I learned a lot from it, and so it serves its purpose. Even though going into it, I'm like, oh, it's going to be this and this, it's going to be awesome, it's going to turn out all these big things, and then I just lose interest after a while because I'm slightly ADD.
Yeah.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But but I always make a point to use new tech when I do it, and so it's still been very valuable. And the thing that always drove me about software that really excited me was it was the act of making things. It's the building. That's
Sure.
the part that's compelling. And of late, my hobby has been woodworking. So I've been, tooling up my shop and getting everything ready so that I can start doing woodworking. So I honestly spent a lot of my downtime watching woodworking videos on YouTube, which is a lot of fun. It's super compelling to me. It's making in general. I mean, it's not just woodworking. I've got an electronics background as well, so combining that with it can be fun. So it's kind of the whole maker movement thing is something that's resonated with me for a long time, and I'm sort of focusing on woodworking because it's a really accessible material to work with. So I do that. I, of course, I guess it shouldn't be any surprise that I'm I've been writing software for 25 years and I play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
That's probably not remotely surprising to anyone. And so that's another thing I do in my downtime is I run a game with some of my friends. Actually, I'm doing that tonight. And that's another creative outlet, right? I'm making a thing. In this case, I'm making a world, and I'm making a story for my friends. As opposed to say, making, a bench or making a mobile app, right? But it's always that focus on creation that excites me. So that's what I do in my downtime. And I mean, I like to go camping too. I did. I've got 3 boys. 2 are teenage boys. He's going to be 12 this month. And they're all in scouts. So they're all Boy Scouts. And so we go camping, and I do a lot of stuff with the scouts as well.
Have you, this is going to be, this is a bit of a change and totally out of the blue, but, so the new exuberance or over exuberance, I guess, has been around blockchain and cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Of course. And have you kept up with any of that or poked around at blockchain at all?
Yeah. The actual mechanisms on how Bitcoin work, the actual blockchain mechanism,
yeah,
it's hard to get your head around how it actually works, but I've been trying to understand it at a low level. Just because I think it is a really big deal. There's a lot of startups around it right now. There's actually one here in Ohio that a lot of my friends work at called Substratum, where they ICO'd to get a big pile of money. to pay everyone to build this blockchain-backed file sharing service and traffic anonymizers. And so you use the cryptocurrency to compensate people who are hosting files for you, or to compensate people for anonymizing your traffic. That's the idea. And so I got close personal friends that are involved in this. I think it's really cool. I think the blockchain part is more interesting than the currency itself aspect. Ethereum's doing a lot of interesting stuff. I'm just starting to get into what all it's capable of, and I've been trying to come up with some toy app that I can build that's going to change the world, but will just end up teaching me Ethereum.
So yeah, the cryptocurrency thing, I feel like that just becomes another currency. All of the governments at some point are going to regulate it, and it's going to be difficult to just be pushing out these currencies and let people do what they want with them. But the smart contract aspect of it, and the ability to create these smart contracts for various purposes, and then track transaction histories completely, and make payments based on smart contracts, or pay out other type of revenue and give people control, is really interesting. So I don't have any time. I don't have time to build anything, but I did. Ken and his wife and we sort of came up with an idea, and I'll share it over to you. Maybe it can be a pet project we can get together. So
there's a natural curve for technical innovation. I mean, we've all seen like the Gartner hype cycle curve, but there's this point at which everyone that has money notices it.
Yeah.
And then they start investing because, hey, I could get in early. And I think what happened with Bitcoin specifically, and then these currencies later, is that because the interesting feature was intrinsically a financial product anyhow, everyone got in earlier than they should have.
Yeah.
And it's created sort of it's because what happens is everyone gets excited, they invest, and then they it's like, this is going to change everything, and there's that over exuberance. You get that bubble, and then the bubble pops, and then and then it goes too low, and then it starts to stabilize. It's kind of like this big ripple, right? It goes up, down, then raises and levels off. And I think with cryptocurrencies, that the bubble happened too soon, and might pop too hard.
Yeah.
And so that could be problematic. I've actually been following Bitcoin for about 10 years because I found it, and I'm like, this looks really interesting. I'm not sure if this cryptocurrency idea is a good idea or not, but I'm going to watch it and see what happens. Just economically, how's that going to play out?
Yeah.
It kind of, in a way, feels like a decentralized company script to me.
Yeah.
Right? It's like anyone can make up money, but it's decentralized because it's that's the nature. That's the whole point of the blockchain, is that it's decentralized.
Yep.
But the thing that's interesting to me is not the money; it's the decentralized aspect. It's you've got that with the blockchain. You've got that with like distributed hash tables, where that's what Napster was originally. But there's a tool I've actually installed on my laptop and I've been playing with called Ipfs, for Interplanetary File System.
Yep.
And it's a distributed way of storing and retrieving files, where if I've got a video and I tell you about it, you can hit the URL, and the URL is a hash of the content of the file, and you'll get it, and then you'll have the file as well. And then when someone else wants the file, they'll get it from both of us, just like you would with BitTorrent.
Yeah.
And then now 3 people have it, and it fans it out across all the people who have the file. And I think all of those technologies, which I've heard have been dubbed Web 3.0,
yeah,
I think they're really interesting. I wish I had. I'm spending more of my time looking into the machine learning stuff because that's my day job.
Sure.
But part of me really wishes I could just spend all my time diving into that, because I think it's really interesting. I like there's just enough of an anarchist in me that likes the aspect of it's hard to censor. There's no central authority, and there's trade-offs with that. But it appeals to me personally.
And it's the incentive. That's when you were just talking about that. It took me back to the days of LimeWire and BearShare and all
Yeah,
that stuff. And the incentive back then was, we can entertainment stuff for free, right, or software
yeah,
for free, or whatever it was. And with the cryptocurrency, that became the incentive, to sort of push the blockchain technology, which is great. But to your point, it sort of took off. There's a movement of these big enterprise organizations. There's a name for it, but I can't remember what it is, of trying to implement more open source within their closed systems. And I think that's where we will actually see blockchain, and we're seeing it to some extent already, try to make blockchain usable for, say, the medical industry, hospitals and doctors, so
yeah,
that they can't, legally can't actually just distribute this data, even if it's protected, that there's no way that this could be kind of decentralized across the
right,
world. But, these are large medical institutions that have thousands and thousands of nodes within their network. And they could very easily set up a blockchain that actually ran within their network, and kind of had some of the benefits of that blockchain. But again, do you call it blockchain at that point? I don't know. But that's kind
private
of,
blockchain. Yeah,
yeah. I think that's where it's going, for the short term. But at some point, we still have to incentivize people to continue to store and process these transactions, and without cash or free MP3s. That's
yeah.
a hole in this thing totally blowing up.
It's,
Cool.
it's interesting, the idea of having an internal blockchain.
Yeah.
Um, I hadn't thought about that before. I mean, I always think about it in terms of public uses. I'm gonna have to noodle on that. That's an interesting idea.
Cool. Well, I do appreciate it. I know Ken didn't get too much in here. This tends to happen with the interviews. I kind of take over and ramble on, but